Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Laverre Constrictors going up against the Kitakami Rogues, and as these two sides have a look at their opening hands, let's have a look at the tail of the tape, because currently the Constrictors are sitting in 8th place, and the Rogues are in 9th place, and neither have secured a spot inside Victory Road, and with only 2 rounds to go, they are not on the right side of that cut line. However, things are so close at the moment, a win here could easily jump either side up into the top 5, so with that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the Psychic decks? Will it be the Darkness decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And going first, it is going to be that Galactic Boss deck of the Rogues, moving the Zubat into the active spot with the Murkrow on the bench. The Constrictors have their Celestic Dream deck, moving the Togepi into the active spot. They've got that Unknown with the check ability on their bench as well, and we can see the Togetic plus the Cynthia already in hand for this Celestic Dream deck, but it is the Rogues going first. They do pull the Rocky Helmet, which is fantastic because they can get this, and they are onto the Zubat, so it could make the Constrictors reluctant to go on the offensive. Plus, they've already got that Golbat in hand, so they will be able to get an evolution on the next turn. The Pokeball being pulled for the Constrictors, they will be able to get another basic Pokemon out of their deck, and it is going to be the Cresselia being pulled, who does need those 2 energy, but they go with the check. Every time they've used this, they have checked their own deck. They've been less concerned with what the opposition are going to do, and they have got the Togekiss coming on the next turn. They are going to get an energy onto the Togepi. They also bring that Cresselia online onto the bench, but they're opting to not go with that Pound. It does do 20 damage, but the 20 recoil from the Rocky Helmet, plus another Golbat has been pulled, and that is exactly what has come online. They would have been able to take this Togepi off the board. Fortunately, it is a metal weakness for the Togepi line as well, so Golbat will only be doing 30 damage instead of getting that additional 20 to wipe it off the board. And there it is, the Togekiss has been pulled for the Constrictors. They are going for the check once again, and they are, as always, checking their own. It will be a Togekiss once again on the next turn, and there's the Togetic coming online. They can continue to go on the offensive if they want, but it will still put them in discard range, of the Golbat. Now the Rogues want to pull the Crobat. The Constrictors taking a risk here if they choose to leave the Togetic in the active spot, and it is going to be the Professor's Research for the Rogues. They still have an opportunity to get this Crobat. It does do 50 damage. They get a Poochyena. They get the Honchkrow. They do not get the card they need. However, that Poochyena has come online. The Honchkrow also is going to come online, evolving that Murkrow. We can see the Mightyena plus the Cyrus in hand for the Rogues, and the Honchkrow gets its first of 2 required energy as the Bite, 30 more damage onto the Togetic, but this is not good as the Constrictors pull their second Togekiss. They're not too concerned with it at the moment. They do go straight for that evolution here, and they are going to get that second energy. They can go for the Overdrive Smash, which is not actually enough to take out the Golbat, but that's where the Cynthia will come into play as they do go with the check again. It is the Togetic next in deck, but here we go, playing the Cynthia, boosting this Overdrive Smash to 110 damage. They will wipe this Golbat off the board. And considering it was almost the Togetic and Togepi that ended up in the discard pile, it is the Constrictors taking the first point in this Game 1 of our best of 3 series. And as we always say in every Game 1 on every video, all 3 games count regardless of the outcome of the second game, because all 3 matchups count towards our leaderboard as we get ever closer to Victory Road in the PokeType League TCG Season A2. That is quite a mouthful, so I'm impressed that I was able to get it out. But here we go, the Poochyena going for the Bite. They're just trying to chip away at the Togekiss here. The Rogues having moved it into the active spot. They don't want to give up the Honchkrow yet. The Togetic has been pulled, another check from the Unknown, and again they are going to check their own deck. It is the Giant Cape. I don't believe that the Unknown has actually done anything offensive all season long as the Cresselia gets its second energy. The Overdrive Smash, 120 damage, because every consecutive turn it does that additional 60, taking the damage up to 120, and the Constrictors have taken their second point here in Game 1. They're in full control. The Rogues need to somehow bring it back. They are moving that Honchkrow, their only option, into the active spot. They pull their Giant Cape. This is going to take Honchkrow's health up to 120, and they don't have to worry too much about this Togekiss for too long, because with this skill dive they can target any Pokemon on the side of the Constrictors, and they do target that Togekiss to get their first point as this Galactic Boss deck are trying to bring it back over the Celestic Dream deck. And it is the Cresselia moved into the active spot. The Constrictors pulling their own giant cape. Now they have no other basic Pokemon in hand here, but they are going for the check to see what they can get next. And it is going to be revealed to be the Professor's Research, so they'll get an extra 2 cards after that. But we may actually see an energy placed onto the unknown, and that is exactly what's going to happen. But it will be the Cresselia, worried about that Moonlight Gain, who gets the energy instead. They really are not concerned with setting up this unknown whatsoever. And the Moonlight Gain 50 damage onto the Honchkrow. And it would normally heal 20 damage from itself, but Cresselia has not taken any damage as the Rogues pull a Pokeball. They're going to get another basic Pokemon out of their deck. It is the Zubat. So this is their second Zubat. They've got the second Golbat already in hand. They still need a Crobat. They only require the 1 energy that's just been placed on it. As the Skill Dive from Honchkrow, they are going to choose to target the Cresselia, and it does 70 damage because of that Darkness weakness coming into play as the Constrictors do pull the Professor's Research. The Rogues are really trying to bring it back here in game 1. They're trying to avoid having to take it to a game 3 potentially. The Professor's Research gets the Drifloon plus the second Drifloon. They are going to get that Drifloon, well, they think of getting the Drifloon online, but first they're going to go with the check once again, and that is going to be that second Cresselia being pulled on the next turn. Now having a look at their 2 Drifloons, one of them does require 1 energy, the other does require 2. But they are going to get that energy onto the Drifloon that's just been put onto the bench. Again, the Rogues have only taken 1 point so far, and they do get the Giant Cape onto the Cresselia because, as we said earlier, that Moonlight Gain will restore 20 health from the Cresselia, 50 damage onto the Honchkrow, which means the Honchkrow will not be able to take it out in the next turn because it only does 50 damage, and with the additional 20, Cresselia will still have 10 health remaining. But the Rogues, playing their Professor's Research, they finally get a Crobat in hand. They get the second Honchkrow as well, the Golbat coming online. Now they could retreat the Honchkrow and chip away at the Cresselia here. I'm not sure they realize that they still have the potential to bring this one if they're hoping to get a win condition. And no, they are willing to give it up. They're just going to take a point by taking down the Drifloon. So it has enough strength. They take out the Drifloon. That gets the Rogues their second point, but it leaves Honchkrow sitting in that active spot. The Constrictors pull the Cresselia. They're not concerned with the one in hand. They're concerned with the Moonlight Gain, and they take the Honchkrow off of the board. And the Constrictors have taken a game 1 in this series. And as we're about to have our first table reset, as we always like to say, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like, share, subscribe, help this series grow as we look to have many more sets to come from Pokemon TCG Pocket. But here we go, our game 2, the Rogues going first with their Endless Nightmare deck. We can see the Darkrai plus the Ekans in hand. They're going with the Darkrai in the active spot. It does have those 3 energy requirements. The Constrictors going with their Distortion World, and they move the Ghastly into the active spot and the Giratina onto the bench. They've got a Gengar in hand, plus they've also got that Pokeball, that Team Rocket Grunt in hand for both teams as well, if they hope to try and get energy off the opposing Pokemon. But the Rogues, they are going to pull one of their 2 Spiritomb here, immediately moving it onto the bench. They've got that Giant Cape plus the Grafaiai, no Shroudle in hand just yet, but the Constrictors have pulled one of their 2 Rotoms as they are going to play the Pokeball to get another basic Pokemon, getting the Clefairy, so they have options here. Now they don't have a Clefable in hand just yet, but they do move the Rotom onto the bench, and they get that 1 energy required for Ghastly. With the Astonish, if they flip ahead, it will be the Rogues having to reveal a card in their hand and shuffling it back into their deck, and that is exactly what happens. It is the Giant Cape going back into the deck of the Rogues here, as they are now going to pull the Shroudle, which is actually fantastic for them, having that Grafaiai in hand, unless that Astonish does cause them to put the Grafaiai back into their deck here. But it is the Darkrai getting its first energy. As we said, it does require 3 energy for that Dark Void that does 60 damage, but it also puts the opposing Pokemon to sleep, and they do have the type advantage over this Distortion World deck with all of them except for the Clefairy. Clefable's being weak to those darkness types. The Giratina getting its first 3 required energy, another Astonish from the Ghastly, but this time they get the Tails, so that Grafaiai is safe in hand for the Rogues. The Pokeball being pulled as well for this Endless Nightmare deck, but before they're even worried about that, they're going to get the Grafaiai online. With that poison coating, they can put the opposing Pokemon in a poisonous state that will take those 10 damage in between every turn as I try to get those words out, and they do flip the head, so Ghastly will be left with that poison status condition. There we go, that sounded much better that time, as they are opting to not play the Pokeball either. Oh, but they do decide to play the Team Rocket Grunt. They want to get the energy off the Ghastly. And that is exactly what they do. This will keep going until they flip a Tails. They flip 4 heads in a row, but if it was a Tails on the first go, that energy would not have been removed off the Ghastly. Now this could actually force the Constrictor's hand if they want to retreat this Ghastly, but they have just pulled the Professor's Research as well. And they do consider using their own Team Rocket Grunt, but instead they do go with the Professor's Research. They get the second Gengar, they get the second Giratina, still no Haunter in hand. As now they're going to get a second energy onto the Giratina. They're willing to give up the Ghastly here because they know that Darkrai will wipe it off the board. It will be moved into the discard pile. The second Ekans has been pulled for the Rogues. They've still got that Pokeball in hand as well, but that third energy onto the Darkrai. They're just going straight for that Dark Void. They're not worried about thinning their deck at all at the moment, and the Ghastly has been taken off the board, and the Rogues have taken their first point here in Game 2 as they're aiming to take it to a Game 3, but the Constrictors want to lock it up here in Game 2. They've just pulled the Clefairy, but that Giratina is now in the active spot, getting its third energy, and now they're going to play their Team Rocket Grunt. They need to get 3 heads here. And they get 1. They get 2. They actually get 3. And that means Darkrai loses all 3 of its energy, which is fantastic for this Distortion World deck. They get the Giant Cape onto the Giratina, boosting its health up to 140, and they can do 70 damage with this Spooky Shot on to the Darkrai. As it does come back over to the Rogues, they've just pulled their Arbok here, and that does require 3 energy, but first they're going to try and go for another Poison Coating. They need to flip the heads, and they are successful once again. Darkrai now having to deal with that Poison status condition, and the Arbok is going to come online. With that Venomous Fang, it does 70 damage, but it guarantees a poisoning onto the opposing Pokemon. The Rogues are going to get a first energy onto the Grafai. At the moment, they've still got that Pokeball in hand that they are not concerned with either, as the Constrictors are going to pull their Rocky Helmet. They can't get that onto the Giratina because it's already got the Giant Cape Pokemon tool, so they get the Rocky Helmet onto the Rotom here. And after doing that, they do decide to bring out that second Giratina. Potentially, they should have waited to put that Giratina out first and move the Rocky Helmet onto it instead. But it does have a no retreat energy thanks to that Levitate ability and having an energy on it, and with that Spooky Shot they get that massive threat that is the Darkrai off the board to level the points at 1 each between these two decks. The Grafai comes into the active spot, so that active Giratina is still in a poisoned state as the Professor's Research is pulled for the Rogues. And now they're finally going to play the Pokeball, and they do get that second Shroudle out of their deck. This Professor's Research could get the second Grafai. As they do play it, they get the Cyrus, and they get the second Arbok, so they may play that second Ekans in hand down now. As the Grafai does get its second energy, and with the Bite does 60 damage to the Giratina, halving its remaining health, but that poisoning takes it down an extra 10 to 50. As the Clefable has been pulled for the Constrictors, they can get one of these Clefairies online. The Clefable does require 3 energy for that Moonblast, but it does reduce the energy that it takes on the coming turn. However, they are still continuing to set up that Giratina, getting its second of 3 required energy, and the Spooky Shot, bringing Grafai down to only 20 health. This active Giratina is an extremely easy target right now. The Rogues do pull their Rocky Helmet. They are going to put it onto the Grafai. They want whoever takes this off the board to take that recoil damage. And they are looking at getting a first energy onto the Arbok. Like we said, it does require 3 to do that 70 damage, but majority of the Pokemon on the side of the Constrictors are weak to these darkness types, except for that Clefairy, Clefable. And the Bite, though, from the Grafai takes that first Giratina off the board. The Rogues have taken their second point. They're 1 point away from taking this to a Game 3. The Constrictors opt in to move their second Giratina into the active spot. It can take this Grafai off the board quite easily. The Haunter has been pulled for the Constrictors, and the Clefable has come online. However, it is the Giratina getting its third deck sorry, not that, third energy here, as it does take that recoil damage from the Grafai before it goes into the discard pile. 2 points to both sides, and the next point will win game 2. The Rogues, as we said, trying to take it to a game 3. The Arbok moved in the active spot, but the second Grafai has been pulled. It is immediately moved onto the bench so they can go for this poison coating. They need to flip another heads to get another poison status condition off, and they're successful in doing it. I believe that is 3 for 3 on poison coating attempts in this game, and they get a second energy onto the Arbok. And all of a sudden, the Rogues look like they're in full control because the Giratina is brought down to only 90 health. The second Rotom has been pulled for the Constrictors. They have no one other than this Clefable that can outlast a hit from the Arbok, but it only has 100 health and it would be poisoned as well. However, they do think of going for the retreat with the Giratina, and that is exactly what they're going to do. They're trying to buy themselves a bit of time. They do cure Giratina of that poisoning. Clefable with 1 energy on it, the second Pokeball being pulled for the Rogues. They can go for another poison coating as well, but they know with this Venomous Fang it will guarantee the poisoning onto the Clefable, so they don't even have to worry about that now. Darkrai being pulled for the Rogues, moved onto the bench, and they play the Cyrus that they've had in hand for some time now as well. That Giratina cannot escape this Venomous Fang because with that weakness it does an additional 20 and wipes it off the board, and this Endless Nightmare deck has forced a game 3 from the Laverre Constrictors. This next game will determine our winner with our final board reset. And again, it is going to be the Rogues going first, having flipped heads. This time they have the Galactic Admin deck going up against the Constrictors Red Chain deck. And they've got quite a number of basic Pokemon here. They're opting to go with the Stunky in the active spot. Only needs 1 energy to go on the offensive. They move both the Skorupi and the Krogunk onto the bench. There is the Azelf and the Duskull in hand for the Laverre Constrictors. And they do choose to go with the Duskull. Now, this entire deck of the Laverre Constrictors is in fact weak to the Darkness type, so they have to contend with this. They are at a huge disadvantage. But the power capabilities of this deck could be put on display as the Giant Cape has been pulled for the Rogues. They've got the Team Galactic Grunt. They're going to play that immediately, trying to get a Stunky or a Krogunk. They do get a Krogunk out of their deck. And they can move that onto the bench if they choose. The Krogunk actually that's already on the bench has that group beatdown as well. It can do 80 damage if they flip 4 heads. And the Professor's research from the Constrictors gets them a second Azelf, gets them the Dusknoir, as they are going to move that Mesprit onto the bench alongside the Azelf. The Rocky Helmet is placed onto the Duskull as well. They want to make the Rogues hesitant to go on the offensive, whereas this Will-O-Wisp will do 20 damage to the Stunky, bringing it down to 50 health. And the Rogues do pull their second Dracon, who has the capabilities of doing 160 damage, and that's before the weakness comes into play, but they are coin flips, 4 of them, 40 for each heads. As the Giant Cape is placed onto the Stunky, it can go for the Scratch. It's only going to do 10 damage, but thanks to that weakness, it does do the additional 30 damage onto the Duskull, but as Stunky does take 20 in return, bringing it down to 50. The Uxie has been pulled for the Laverre Constrictors for Mesprit to get its Supreme Blast off. It requires 3 energy and both Uxie and Azelf to be on the bench, but it does 160 damage. It can wipe anyone on the side of this Galactic Admin deck off the board, as another 20 damage onto the Stunky from the Duskull. A Pokeball being pulled for the Kitakami Rogues. They are immediately going to play that here. And they do get their second Stunky. They can choose to start setting up these Drapions though. It does require 3 energy, but instead they're worried about setting up the Krogunk, a very interesting choice, because that Drapion also has the potential to poison the opposing Pokemon, but this Scratch from Stunky will take Duskull off the board, but not before that Rocky Helmet brings Stunky down to only 10 health. And the Rogues may have been thinking ahead, setting up that Krogunk, but for now the Constrictors are going to move the Uxie into the active spot. With its Mind Boost, it does 20 damage to the opposing Pokemon, but it can generate an energy for either Mesprit or Azelf, either of their choosing. As they do get that 1 required energy onto the Uxie, they are going to move a Giant Cape onto it to boost its health up to 90 as While they don't want to have to contend with a Skuntank, which we are yet to see from this deck, but the Mind Boost, 20 damage to wipe the Stunky off the board. They immediately get a point back, but they also get another energy onto the Mesprit here. So Mesprit only requires one more energy to be able to go for that Supreme Blast. The catch is, if it does go for it, it has to discard all energy attached to it. And it is the Krogunk moved into the active spot, and there is a Skuntank being pulled for the Rogues. They move their second Stunky onto the bench. They move the Krogunk onto the bench. And with this group beatdown Krogunk in the active spot, they get a second energy. It gets a coin flip for every Pokemon on their side. So they get 4 coin flips. They need 4 heads. They get 1. But they miss one of them. They get 3, however. So it will get 80 damage, which means that Giant Cape has saved the Uxie from being eliminated by the Krogunk. That is why they needed 4 heads. And the Constrictors pull a Pokeball. They immediately play it. They get the second Mesprit in hand as well. And that benched Mesprit gets its 3rd energy. They can retreat the Uxie back to the bench, and this allows the Mesprit to go for the Supreme Blast. It will do 160 damage and wipe this Krogunk off the board, moving it into the discard pile of the Kitakami Rogues. The Laverre Constrictors are 1 point away from winning this series, as the Rogues are on the back foot. And they opt to move their second Krogunk into the active spot. It only requires 1 energy to go for that beat that does do 20 damage. The second Skuntank has been pulled as well for the Rogues. And they hover that energy over the Stunky, but they decide to go with it on the Krogunk because this Mesprit can't go on the offensive right now. So it does take the 40 damage from the Krogunk. The Celestic Town Elder has been pulled for the Laverre Constrictors as they're looking through their hand right now. They do move their second Mesprit onto, they think about it actually, but they don't move it onto the bench. They're really contemplating their options here right now. And they do decide to go with that second Mesprit onto the bench. They do give it its first energy, and they are going to send it back over to the Rogues. This will free up the Krogunk to go on the offensive, but first they're going to move the Skuntank online. That Poison Gas does do 50 damage, but it does require 2 energy. And here with the beat, that first Mesprit has been taken down. So the Rogues have gotten their second point. We are 1 point away from determining our winner. The next point will win, as the Constrictors need to think about how they want to approach this, but things are not looking good for them right now because of that Skuntank on the bench. The Mesprit is moved into the active spot. They did just pull a Pokemon Communication. They can put a Pokemon from their hand back into their deck to get a Pokemon back out. They've also got that Celestic Town Elder still in hand. However, as we said, this is not good. That Mesprit still requires 1 more energy. They are going to play the Pokemon Communication, and they are going to move that Azelf back into the deck, clearly hoping for a Dusclops. But that Skuntank is hovering on the bench of the Rogues. It can see it here, as the Mesprit can't do anything. They send it over to the Rogues. They pull their Professor's Research. They're still going to play that just in case. They do pull the Toxicroak. It is the Toxicroak though. Now looking through their hand, I'm not sure they can see it just yet, but now they get an energy onto the Skuntank. They're going to retreat the Krogunk, the Skuntank in the active spot. This Poison Gas, that weakness coming into play, will do 70 damage, and Mesprit is wiped off the board. And with that, the Kitakami Rogues have taken game 2 and 3 to take the series over the Laverre Constrictors, and with that they've jumped all the way up into 5th place, as next round they are going up against the Levincia Wonders, whereas for the Constrictors they're now in 9th place, and next round they'll be going up against the Pastoria Hydras. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what you thought the best card was, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.